One of my favorite things about Zelos is how they continually tweak things and evolve and refine their designs. It just seems like with every new watch that they release, something's a little bit better than the previous one. And I feel like this watch that we're checking out for them today is going to be a kind of a new benchmark for the company. For me, this is the best three-hand dive watch that I've seen come out of Zelos. But it's also one of the most expensive. Now, a lot of the additional cost does come from the new movement that they've used inside of this. They've got a pretty high-end Swiss movement that is very impressive. But I think at a $650 introductory price, a lot of people are going to be asking if it's worth it. And today we're going to take a look at that. Today we're checking out the new Spearfish from Zelos watches. Hey guys, welcome back to Just the Watch. My name's Dave, I live in Japan, and I love to collect affordable watches. And that's one of the reasons I really appreciate Zelos. They give you an incredible bang for your buck with almost any watch that they put out. One of the most frustrating things about Zelos watches is that they can be hard to get a hold of because they often sell out so quickly because there's such a high demand for them. And today we're taking a look at a brand new dive watch from Zelos. They call this one the Spearfish. If you're familiar with their product lines, this one is kind of based off of the Swordfish. It's kind of like a premium version of it. It has a more elegant and refined design with some upgraded materials, most notably with a brand new Swiss Lejeune G100 automatic movement. Now we'll get into this movement more in just a moment, but basically this movement is meant to be kind of a replacement or an upgrade for the ETA 2824 or the Sellita SW200. For me, the most impressive thing about this movement is that while it retains that 28,800 beats per an hour or 8 ticks per second smooth sweeping second hand, it increases the power reserve from around 40 hours up to 68 hours. But before we jump into that, let's get into the dimensions and specifications of the Spearfish and talk about what you're getting for that $650. Now, Zelos did send me this watch for free to keep, which is why you saw the paid promotions flag at the beginning of this video. However, other than the watch itself, I did not receive any compensation from Zelos, nor did they have any input into the content of this review. The Spearfish comes with a 40mm case, 20mm lugs, and about 46.5mm lug to lug. It's 12mm tall, features 200 meters of water resistance, and you get a sapphire crystal on both the dial and on the display case back. Both the case and bracelet are made of stainless steel that has been treated with a hardening treatment, which will make it more scratch resistant. And as mentioned, inside you're getting a Swiss Lejeune G100 automatic movement. Now again, price on this is going to be $650 introductory price. The way Zelos sells watches is they release their watches at an introductory price. Oftentimes they will sell out at that price, but if they don't, then the prices will jump up to the full retail price later. And again, looking at their current lineup, I think this makes it maybe their second most expensive three-hand dive watch. But even at that $650 price point, I feel like this watch easily holds its own against watches from other brands in that price point and offering things that you would not find from those other brands, like that Swiss movement, for instance. Now, talking about the design of this watch, again, they've kind of started with the Swordfish, but they've really made everything just a little bit sleeker, a little bit more elegant. So we'll start by taking a look at the dial of this watch, and I really love what they've done with the handset on here. This is a handset that is clearly from Zelos. The minute hand in particular is very beautiful. It has this kind of cathedral-esque divides in it, and it's very long, slender, and comes to a nice sharp point. Both the hour and minute hand are cut very sharply. They're polished and beveled and just have a beautiful look, and that's also matched with the applied indexes on this. I have the Frost colorway, so it has a white dial, and they've done just an amazing job of creating a lot of contrast against that by going with polished black metal on the handset and on the markers. The orange second hand lends a nice pop of color. This colorway with the white dial is actually a lumed dial, and we'll see exactly how good this lume is in comparison with some of Zelos' other watches when we get to the lume test portion of the review. The dial is also textured with a subtle kind of radial brushing almost. It kind of almost reminds me of like a wood grain. On the other colorways, it's much more distinct and much more noticeable. It's very subtle on the white dial version, but it definitely gives an interesting effect when the watch is glowing in the dark. Now, in addition to multiple colorways, they also have multiple bezel options. I went for the 12-hour bezel option because I absolutely love 12-hour bezels. On the 12-hour bezel versions, they've gone with a bi-directional 60-click bezel, which takes some getting used to. It's definitely a much different feel than a 120-click unidirectional bezel. And this one in particular has a softer, quieter click to it. Despite that, it operates very smooth, and each click does slide into place. And once it is locked into place, you don't get any backplay, and the alignment is perfect. As far as the layout on the bezel, there's a couple of things I wish they would have done a little bit differently. For one, I would have preferred to have a triangle at 12 o'clock instead of a 12 o'clock numeral, making it a little bit easier to orient yourself quickly while using the bezel. And then they've gone with hash marks at the half-hour marks, which I don't find particularly useful. I would have much preferred to have full minute indexes on the bezel, even if they weren't loomed, but just having those markings on there I think would make it a little bit more useful as a timing instrument as well as a dual time. Moving on to the case and bracelet, the first thing that really jumped out at me was the lug design. The lugs appear to be longer and thinner, more slender than on the Swordfish, and yet the lug-to-lug isn't any longer than the Swordfish is. To me, the lugs do have a little bit of a spear-like look to them, so maybe that's why they decided to go with the name Spearfish. And the finishing is just excellent. Very crisp definition between the polished and brushed surfaces. It really gives the watch a premium look, and that case hardening treatment should allow it to stay in pristine condition for a longer period of time. When you look at the watch from a side profile, you can see that the lugs have kind of a nice, elegant curve to them. And with the beveling that's been done to the case, it makes the case appear a lot slimmer. The bracelet is just incredibly fluid and comfortable on the wrist with amazing articulation. It's definitely helped by having female end links as well, so it just wraps perfectly around your wrist. And it really does feel like the bracelet and the watch itself were made for each other. Paired with the bracelet is something that's become sort of standard for Zelos, and that's a tool-free micro-adjust clasp. This is probably my favorite clasp that I've seen on dive watches. It allows you to change the size of the bracelet just by sliding a little lever on the clasp. Now, flipping the watch over, you're going to see a sapphire see-through case back, which will allow you to see that Le Joe Perret G100 movement. Now, Le Joe Perret is a Swiss movement manufacturer. They manufacture very high-end movements. In fact, they supplied the movement for Zelos's previous kind of luxury release, which was the Zelos Mirage. So the G100 movement kind of marks Le Joe Perret's entrance into the entry-level market. This is a movement that was specifically designed to be compatible with the ETA 2824. That means it will fit in watch cases that were designed for the ETA 2824, and I believe even the handset and crowns and everything are compatible as well. But it is not an ETA 2824 clone like the Sleet SW200 or the STP 111 or so many other ones that are out there. This is actually a completely different movement with a completely different architecture. It's a new movement with a modern design and better performance than the ETA 2824, particularly with that 68-hour power reserve while maintaining that smooth 8 ticks per second sweeping second hand. Those two features combined together, along with the pedigree that Le Joe Perret offers, makes this one of the most impressive movements that I've seen. And while I don't know if this is going to be the case, my gut tells me that you're probably not going to find this movement in watches under $1,000 very often. Stated accuracy on this watch is plus or minus 12 seconds per day. Over the course of a few days of timing mine was running at about plus 8 seconds. And I love that they went with a display case back on here because you can really appreciate the movement and the architecture. Again, it is completely different from looking at an ETA 2824. So if you are building a collection wanting to incorporate different movements, this is a chance to get one that I think is really cool. And it's great that you can see it and you can kind of compare the differences. Okay, the LUME is good. Let's see exactly how good by running it through my J-Score LUME test. One distinct feature of the Frost colorway is that the white dial is actually a fully loomed dial, loomed in BGW9, which has an icy blue glow compared with the hands, markers, and bezel, which are loomed in C3X1, which has a green glow. C3X1 is the brightest and longest lasting lume that Superluminova offers. So watches that feature it typically have a pretty impressive lume performance. One thing that I noticed about the fully loomed dial on this version is that the choice to go with the fully loomed dial here appears to be primarily a stylistic choice, not a functional choice. If the hands and markers already feature lume, there's not really any functional benefit to looming the dial as well. It just looks really cool. But I've found that having a fully loomed dial and loomed hands and markers, even if they're in different colors, actually winds up hurting legibility in the long run. When everything is lit up, it can be difficult to distinguish the loomed hands and markers against the loomed dial. However, on the frost colorway of the Spearfish, the dial is not nearly as bright as the hands and markers. It has a cool icy blue glow that really showcases the texture of the dial in the dark, but the glow does fade fairly quickly. The result is that it's going to look really cool for the first 20 minutes or so in the dark, but then after that the dial is going to kind of fade away and allow the markers in the hands to be read very clearly, and I feel like this is a really good trade-off. This was particularly an issue to me on my frost version of the Zelos Horizons that I also have. After an hour or so in the dark, it becomes very difficult to distinguish the hands from the background. On my J-score scale, the Spearfish scores an 11, which is a little bit low compared to other Zelos watches featuring C3X1. However, it's still a very respectable score, putting it slightly above the Seiko Samurai. So I would say the Lume here is very impressive, it's extremely functional, but it's not insane like you get on some other Zelos watches. Okay, so to wrap this up, let's talk about the justification of that $650 price point. Why does this watch cost $650 when the Swordfish, which looks very similar in dimensions and specifications and design, is only $350? The main difference that justifies that cost is that movement. I found at least one other brand that's planning to implement this movement, and they were previously using the Sellita SW200, and they're going to be charging an extra $200 when they upgrade to the G100. Now the Zelos Swordfish, that $350, comes with the Seiko NH35, which is significantly cheaper than the Sellita SW200. So if you go by that one other brand that I was able to find, the jump between a Seiko NH35 and a Le Joparet G100 could cost around $300 right there. Other than that, this watch also features the case hardening treatment, which I don't believe that the original stainless steel Swordfish has had, and then you've got the added sapphire crystal on the underside instead of a solid case back. Finally, I think you are getting a little bit higher level of finishing than you get on Zelos's most affordable options. The sharpness on the edge of the hands, the finely brushed surfaces on the case, and the bracelet all stood out to me examples of excellent finishing at this price range. Those are the primary differences between the $350 Swordfish and the $650 Spearfish. But let's continue talking about that price as we jump into the cons, because I feel like for most people that's going to be one of the biggest drawbacks. There's going to be a lot of Zelos fans that are going to have a little bit of a sticker shock seeing this priced at $650. When they produce a watch at under $400, the value that they offer is, quite frankly, kind of insane. And I think some people expect that sort of insane level of value in all of their watches. So it puts them in a little bit of an awkward position, because I think if you take this watch and compare it to pretty much any other $650 watch not made by Zelos, this is probably going to come out significantly ahead in a lot of areas. But when you compare it to Zelos's $350 Swordfish, a lot of people are going to be scratching their heads, I think. Now, cost aside, there were two other cons that I found in this watch. One is with the screw links that they used in here. And I ran into some pretty significant difficulties sizing the bracelet. I wound up removing 3 links, and 2 out of the 3 I had no problems with. They screwed in and out just fine. But the last one I couldn't get screwed back in for the life of me. I actually stripped one screw and then had to kind of get it back out and use one of the screws that I didn't strip. And even that one I couldn't get it to go back into the hole. Eventually what I did is I got a pair of needle nose pliers and kind of used that as a wrench to gently get it started into the hole. And once it got started, I was able to finish up with a screwdriver, and it went in smoothly after that. But it was a pretty nerve-wracking half an hour or so trying to get this in. And I was talking to Shane, who also got one of these watches, and he had pretty much the exact same problem on his as well. So I suspect that some people are going to be struggling to get the bracelet sized because of that. Which is kind of a shame, because it's both such a minor issue and such an incredibly frustrating one, because if you screw it up and strip a screw, you might wind up rendering your bracelet completely unusable and having to ship it back to Zelos. The good news is Zelos is legendary for their customer service, so I don't think you would have any problem getting service for that, but still, it's something to be aware of. And finally, well, I absolutely love the clasp on this watch because of its functionality. It is a little bit on the thick side, and you're definitely going to feel it if you're working at a computer desk a lot, but that could also hold true for most other dive watches. But going back to what I said in the beginning of the review, I'm still in the same place. I feel like this is the best dive watch that I've seen out of Zelos, particularly when it comes to like a 3-hand watch without any fancy complications. This is just a great refined dive watch that can be worn daily. It has a great look to it, great build quality. And if you have around a $650 budget, you're going to be hard pressed to find something that will offer you better specifications, a better design, better build quality than this one will. At least that's my take on it. As always, I appreciate hearing your guys, so drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you think of this watch. And don't forget to stop by my website, justthewatch.com. You can pick up t-shirts and hoodies that have some cool watch-themed designs like this one. This is actually a new one that I've just got out there. I did a Scuba Dude shirt a while back, and a couple of Russian commenters said, you know what, in Russia we don't actually call the Vostok the Scuba Dude, we call it the Man in Bubble. And they told me how to say it in Russian, so I decided to kind of put that slogan underneath that one. So this says Man in Bubble in Russian and English underneath the Vostok Amphibia design. So head over to the website, you can pick it up there. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for today. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you later. Bye.